serious people of Reddit that believe in the paranormal, ghosts, demons, angels, etc. What exactly happened to make you start believing? I remember when I was 9 years old I used to hang this dumb paper chains in my room. I would just hang up pieces of paper on a wall, like decorations. Anyways, one day I was playing in the room and looked forward at my shadow and just stared at my shadow. For some reason it seemed a little off. Then the shadow proceeded to stretch up or stand up. It's hard to describe, and a hand reaches up and knocked one of the papers off the wall, and it was taped up there pretty good. I remember freaking the fuck out and just bolted out of there into my grandma's room. Over time I got over that, but then 8 years later I remember telling my dad the story as a joke, because I thought he would laugh, and his response was, "Oh yeah, you mean shadow people? Yeah, our family always sees that, especially the oldest in each family. I've seen it, my dad has seen it, my mom has seen it, and her mom etc. BTW, they are the oldest siblings in their family, as am I. I was scared of course, but thought he was fucking with me again. So I called my grandpa and grandma literally 10 minutes later about shadow people, and they proceeded to tell me all these stories about being followed and scarier shit than I've experienced. It honestly freaked me the fuck out, and since then I try to look away from my shadow. Also, my grandma has a lot of shadow people stories, but refuses to tell me because, as she has told me, I'm very sensitive and wouldn't be able to take it. She's not wrong. My childhood best friend had a Rottweiler, Tyler, who passed away a few years before we started hanging out. One night, I spent the night at his house and woke up in the middle of the night to a Rottweiler staring me in the face. I thought it was his new Rottweiler, Rowdy, he had, so I went to pet it, and my hand just went right through it. I told him about it the next morning, and they said it was normal for them to see or hear him still roaming around the house every once in a while. I've had a few paranormal interactions since, but that was the one that solidified my beliefs. I thought that I struck and killed a girl that wasn't there. I was driving home late at night from a double shift, so admittedly I was tired. I had my radio blaring to keep awake. I was driving through the backwoods on a road that I had learned to take as the occasional shortcut. During the day the road was busy and congested, but at night it was always empty save for a stray deer or raccoon. I'm driving, jamming out, and admittedly speeding. I take a corner too quickly, and there in front of me was a young girl about 19 or 20 with long dark hair, wearing jeans and a light colored blouse. For a split second I saw her eyes reflected in the headlights, saw the look of shock and fear on her face, and I swerved hard off the road and into a ditch. There was no way that I didn't hit her. I jumped out of the car and started walking back to the spot I had last seen her, and flagged down a passing car to tell them to call 911. This was in the days before everyone had cell phones. Cops came, EMT came, and there was no one. No body, no girl, and I was given a sobriety test on the spot. I get home much later than I should have, and my wife is waiting for me as I hadn't arrived on time. I'm shaken as I can still see the girl's face in my head, and I recount the story to my wife, who goes white. She runs upstairs and grabs a yearbook and tells me to flip through the senior pictures. Page 3, there she is, looking exactly as I had seen and described her. I ask my wife if she knows the girl, or if she has hers or her family's number. That's when my wife informs me that the girl died 3 years prior during a hit and run around that exact curve. I wasn't from the area, there were no ghost stories involving that road, and I had no way of knowing that the girl that I picked out of a lineup of seniors was already dead. To this day I still wonder what happened. Was I tired? Had I heard her name or seen her face on a memorial newscast or clipping and not registered it? Or had I actually encountered what to this very moment I still consider the most terrifying event in my life, as I honest to God thought I was going to jail? I'm not 100% positive, but I can say this: I can still see her face lit up by my headlights clear as a goddamn bell. My mom had always told me stories about how she was 100% sure my biological paternal grandfather was watching over me. As a baby, we lived with my grandmother for a bit. My grandfather was a heavy smoker, and my mom would often smell cigarette smoke in the house despite no one smoking. My deceased grandfather never lived in this house. Similarly, when we first moved into the house, one night my mom heard and saw the camera sitting on the dresser flash and take a photo. My mom assumed it was my dad taking a picture of us, but in the morning there was no photo and my dad said he never woke up. My mom attributed it to my grandfather capturing the moment. Cut to like 15 years later, my family moved to a different state, brand new house. I remember standing in the kitchen and saw a flash of white run across the kitchen followed by the distinct smell of cigarettes. That's when I knew shit was real. When I was about 5 I had a dream one night which involved the whole of my family. We took my grandma out to go shopping, wheeling her there in her wheelchair, but for some reason left her in a room with just a hanging light in it. We then spent the rest of the dream shopping and then came back to get her, only she wasn't there, just her wheelchair. We searched high and low for her, but she was nowhere to be found. This was traumatic enough for me to wake up, and my mother was sat by my bed and she asked me what was wrong. I told her about the dream, and she burst into tears. It turns out my grandma had died that night. Something very strange happened to me when I was roughly 15 years old. I lived in a house with my family all my life, and was the house I grew up in. Anyway, so my parents bought the house. When it went up for sale due to an old man passing away in it, naturally 20 years later we were looking at other houses and planning on moving due to the neighborhood changing for the worse. That's when weird shit starting happening. Somehow things started disappearing and relocating. Believe it or not, somehow a cucumber ended up on the sink in our bathroom upstairs. Then a rock mysteriously appeared in my room on my bed. And the worst of it was one morning I was awoken by a very firm grasp on my inner thigh. No one was home, and it wasn't a dream. Nothing too crazy, but I believed some type of spirit got attached to our family or something and didn't want us leaving. It certainly was real and no one could explain it. Edit. I do remember the address and I originally posted it. I deleted it because of subrules. If a mod tells me I can, I'll put it back. Otherwise, IDK. I guess if I'm allowed to DM it to you, ask. Also, while I did relay this exactly as I experienced it, I know kids are weird and unreliable. As far as I know, I just lived in an old nasty house with a bug infestation. Maybe the landlord was trying to scare us into moving out. Our rent was late more than once, haha. When I was 10, my family moved to an old house in a small town. The night we moved in, I saw a dark figure in the master bedroom mirror behind me. A man in a wide-brimmed hat, but just a black silhouette. Everyone in the house had vivid nightmares nearly every night the entire time we lived there. My younger brother couldn't sleep because of zombies in our room. I had a bunk bed that was a twin on top and a double on the bottom. One night, dead asleep, I somehow flew so hard off the top bunk that I landed a good foot away from the bed without touching the bottom bunk, which jutted out over a foot from the top. One morning, the kitchen floor was completely covered in maggots. One morning, there was a mass of lizard corpses in the pantry, melted together in various stages of decay. There was no way it was there before. Someone would have noticed. It was smelly and in plain sight. Finally, the trigger for my mom to say fuck this shit, I'm out. 6. There was a large building behind our house that had been some type of big shed. We didn't use it because there was a giant beehive basically taking up an entire wall. I don't remember who saw it first, but there was a blurry white apparition in the building's window. A woman in an older, traditional dress, the kind with a headscarf and apron. She was looking to the left. All of us saw her, 4 people, and just stared for several minutes. I've blocked out a lot of that time in my life, but I remember enough to know there was something wrong with that house. I'm a pharmacist. One day while working, I waited on one of my regular customers. He was about 80 years old and relatively healthy for his age. He came in routinely to pick up his lisinopril/HCTZ and atorvastatin. Usually, he didn't have the best attitude towards any of the staff. This day was unlike any other. We started chatting when he had come in to pick up his medications, and he mentioned that he'd be moving soon, away from the area. He reiterated many times that he had no idea where he'd be going, but that he wouldn't be here in our town anymore. He kept thanking us for all that we had done for him over the years, and he even apologized for giving us a hard time. About 3 weeks later, I'd received a fax from an accounting office requesting this patient's records regarding total dollars spent on medication. This is fairly common, as in many cases, that amount is tax deductible. The thing that struck oddly to me is that the request was made on behalf of a trust. Also, not uncommon but sort of odd. I called the accounting office to discuss the request only to find out that the patient had died 2 months prior to his last visit to my pharmacy. My heart sank, even though our exchange during his visit was good. I thought that I'd been confused about the dates, but I verified his signature for the prescription pickup, and sure enough, the date and time were well after his time of death. After that encounter, I believe, it actually made me very emotionally satisfied that I haven't really had ends with us. We were seemingly important enough to him that he came to us to set things right. Anything happened to me as an adult that has reconfirmed my beliefs, but my mum always used to tell me stories of stuff that would happen to her when I was a baby and we were renting a specific house in the hills. She said unexplained things always used to happen to her after I was born, such as taps turning on in the kitchen by themselves when she was sitting in the lunchroom and could see the kitchen sink from where she was. Pictures would fall from the walls, but when she would look at the nail it was sticking out straight and not bent, therefore making the picture fall. The rocking chair in the lounge would often rock as though someone was in it. And the creepiest of all, if you ask me, she would hear footsteps go up the stairs and into the room above my room and hear something playing with all my toys. I was a tiny baby, so it wasn't me. Safe to say, mum never left me in a room on my own. So, I worked as a carer in New Point K in Sheffield. I'd worked in care for well over a year at this point, so was pretty well trained and used to the work by now. In a care job you see people die, or people who have died, and the first person to know was a carer. So death isn't anything I was particularly scared of, as it's a natural course of life. Our company started with a new care package for a lady. We were a big company at the time, so we had lots of cares and lots of clients, which sadly meant the same careers didn't necessarily see the same clients day in day out. But with new management they were trying to stub this out and get some continuity to the care. So if only ever been to this last a couple times a week, usually in the morning or at lunch. I'd been rostered on for the whole week, all 4 visits: morn, lunch, tea, bed. So morning went well. Everything was fine. Her house was lovely, albeit a bit too big for her, seeing as though she lived in the living room and kitchen. Her bed was downstairs, and so was a commode, which we emptied upstairs in one of the bathrooms. On a routine bed call usually consists, for this lady, washing, using commode, cup of tea, into nightie, into bed. So after everything was done we made sure to empty the commode upstairs. So I went through the living room, and opposite is a basement that's under the stairs. The first thing I noticed is it was unlocked and slightly open. Now I wouldn't think anything of it, but this lady lives alone, can't walk without help, nor does she have any family to visit her, and all our friends are sadly dead. I'm the only person she has seen all day, as I've been on her rota for the entire day. I shut the door, lock it with the bolt, then continue through the hall to get up the stairs. It's pitch black because it's winter, and it's dark at 6 PM. I switch the lights on as I go. I stop at the first step and look to the top. It's weird. I start to feel a pricking in the air, almost like static, and I have a sense of impending doom at the bottom of my stomach. I have to go up because this commode needs emptying. So I run up the stairs, trying so hard not to spill the commode, and head straight to the end of the hall, and I to the bathroom, empty it out, turn the light off, shut the door. Once I shut it, I heard a thud, almost like a body falling. Me thinking the worst, I run downstairs and make sure the last hasn't fallen out of bed. She hadn't, but her armchair had moved closer to the bed, almost locking the door into the kitchen. Now I 100% locked that door when I came in, I always do, so noon can come in. I move the chair back to where it was, and it was almost like there was something shoving it. It was difficult to move, but it's never usually like this. The lady turns to me and says, "Oh no dear, you can leave it there, Harold likes to sit there." I just sort of stopped, not thinking I heard her right. I know her husband was called Harold, so I left it as she said, and rather quickly made my way out the house. When locking the door I distinctly heard a male voice and the lady laughing. I never went back in the house. I used to work at a movie theater and there was a lot of weird shit that happened there. I was a manager, so I had to close down the theater often at 3 AM and was one of the only ones who could access different parts of the theater for safety reasons, such as the ceilings above the auditoriums to change lights. One night I'm the literal only manager on duty and the only one with access to a catwalk that was above the lobby ceiling. This catwalk has most of the server equipment for the television displays of ticket times on it. One day the whole system just gets buggy and turns off. I run up there to try to reset it and notice the box that powered the TVs is unplugged. Note, I'm the only one with keys and thus access to this room. So, obviously I'm looking for foul play. If someone broke into here to mess with me. Lots of dingus work at the theater and we had a lot of fun. But all available hiding spots were empty and I was alone. One night myself and a fellow manager were closing the theater on a super busy Saturday night. Pretty sure it was one of the Hobbit movies. Theater is locked and no customers are in there and I'm walking around turning off everything in a breaker room. I think I hear running outside the room and I assume my coworker is finished upstairs. I radio him to turn off games while he's down here and he radios back, 8 man, I'm almost finished upstairs. So that freaked me out because we have had cases where people try to sneak into the theater at night. So I bust through the door and think I see a girl's foot zooming into one of the theaters. I ask him if he had turned off the lights in theater 3, the one the girl went in, and he said he had. Now I assumed the girl couldn't see and would have a hard time looking for a place to hide, so I told him to leave them off because I think a girl is in there and to shine a booth light to look for her. He radios me, I see her laying down in the middle top row, so I tell him to flick on the lights and I storm in there ready to yell at her. I get to the row and there's no one there. I look around and realize I was played, so I walk it up to the booth. Haha, you got me. But as I look up I see him in the booth window, jaw dropped. This sent a chill down my spine because I've had to fight off a lot of drugged up people in the lobby and theaters, and for some reason I felt as if I was about to be attacked. I whipped around in preparation of probable scratches and biting, but there was no one there. He walks me, dude, what the fuck? I asked what happened and he was too shaken to answer, so I asked him where she went and he was pointing at the screen. I ran over to it and opened it up so I could get behind there to drag this girl out. I kept saying I was about to call the police if she didn't hurry up and get the fuck out, but as I got behind there was nothing. I hear, did you get her? From the coworker on the walkie, and I told him she wasn't in here and if he was sure. Then when I looked out into the auditorium and at the exit doors I saw her, naked as all hell, but like pale, grossly pale and just standing in the doorway. I looked away to get my leg over the front of the screen room and she was now like 20 feet closer. Now I could tell more of her and I still remember how there was just this naked girl standing there and I shouted at her and she flinched and bolted and I immediately followed. I was gaining on her when she turned the corner and into an empty hallway, and as I rounded she was gone. Fucking poof. I immediately went over to the cameras and checked the footage to see where she went, and literally the only thing I see in the hallway camera was me running out of the auditorium and stopping in disbelief. No lady, nothing. Just me. I sat there in disbelief for about 5 minutes until my coworker said I'm too scared to come down alone. And we closed up shop together.